Welcome to Next Games, The Journey of CyberLogic, a guide to Final Fantasy XI. Episode 8, Job Setup. Now in this video, we'll go over the different job quests to obtain the other jobs. We'll go into subjobs and which ones are some of the better ones when it comes to endgame content. And then we'll discuss leveling your main job through level 30 and what you need to make sure to keep in mind. We'll also touch upon the topics of fame, finishing getting all of your magical maps, macros, and starting our access to Abysia. Now in our last episode, we discussed each of the 22 jobs, detailing what it is their primary roles are in endgame content. Now after you have selected what job you would like to use for your first main, the path to acquiring that job will be dramatically different depending on which job you selected. So let's quickly talk about the differences between acquiring these 22 jobs. I will also take this time to point out some of the more widely used subjobs in the game. Let's first start with the 6 jobs that you are offered at the beginning of the game. You obviously don't need to do anything in order to use any of these jobs if you've selected them as your main. I'll also point out that Warrior is one of the best melee subjobs in the game. White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage are all excellent subjobs for mages at the end of the game, so even if you have not selected one of these as your main, you will more than likely end up leveling Warrior to level 49 as a sub-job for your melee jobs, or one of these 3 mage jobs to level 49 for your mage jobs, or all 3 of them. Also note that Thief here is a phenomenal sub-job when you want to employ Treasure Hunter. You get 1 tier of this at level 15, and then a final tier just before you hit that level 49. So therefore, you want to at least level your Thief to level 15 to use it for this purpose until you get to endgame. This brings us to the next 6 jobs: Paladin, Dark Knight, Ranger, Bard, Beastmaster, and Summoner. Now to get all of these jobs unlocked, all you need to do is complete a simple quest, and the most challenging thing here is it may be in a location of the world that you haven't been to yet. I suggest you utilize the Unity Warp to get you to wherever it is the quest is going to take you, and make sure you bring plenty of silent oils and prism powders, because more than likely wherever it is you're headed will have powerful enemies that will attempt to thwart your attempt to finish the sub-job quest. I will also point out that some of these quests that you will need to acquire these jobs will have bosses in them that are rather challenging for a level 30 player. However, all should be doable for a level 30 player with trust. I usually recommend freshly summoning your trust right before popping them so they're completely topped off with HP and MP. I'll also point out there are a few quests that you cannot use trust to defeat the boss on, such as the Dragoon quest, so make sure you become extra prepared for these. This brings us to our next 3 jobs, the rise of the Zealot jobs, Dragoon, Samurai, and Ninja. Now in order to unlock Ninja and Samurai, you will need access to Norg. However, if you've been following along with our journey, you should already have that access unlocked, as you should have at this point already completed that chapter in Rhapsodies of Vana'diel that has given you access. I'll also point out that both Ninja and Samurai are excellent subjobs endgame. Ninja is good at giving any job shadows to make them more resilient, and Samurai can be a great subjob for melees looking to increase their TP gain. Now Ninja and Samurai both have bosses that you need to defeat at the end of their job quest. However, you can use trust for those fights, making them quite trivial. However, Dragoon requires you to complete it alone, and therefore I consider this to be the most difficult of the group. Now let's move on to the 3 jobs added in the Treasures of the Art Urkheg expansion: Puppet Master, Blue Mage, and Corsair. Now this is where you're definitely going to have to start to invest some time before you can even get to the sub-job quest, because in order to actually complete any of the sub-job quest for these 3 jobs, you're going to have to get to Whitegate, and in order to get there, you're going to have to take a very lengthy boat ride from Mora. This may sound like a quick journey, but between the time it takes to wait for the boat and for it to actually travel across the ocean and get to its destination of Whitegate, it usually can take upwards of an hour. Making things even worse, if you want to get the sub-job of Corsair or Puppet Master, you will then need to hop on another boat to take that to Nashmile to finish your sub-job quest. Whereas the previous sub-job quest that we've discussed will take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes depending on how long it takes you to get to the particular zones. These 3 sub-job quests will normally take you 2 to 4 hours to complete, if you include all the time it takes you to travel to this nation for the first time. Speaking of, when you get there, both in Nashmau and Whitegate, make sure you get the home point crystals immediately so you never again have to go on this very lengthy journey. You can just use those to get back to these locations. Please note you do not need to start the Treasures expansion missions in order to complete these 3 sub-job quests. You simply can get right to work and get the quest done. Out of the 3 of these, the main one that would normally be used as a sub-job is Blue Mage, and that's normally for tanking jobs such as Paladin. This brings us to our next 2 jobs, Scholar and Dancer. These you gain access to in the Wings of the Goddess expansion. Now, in order to actually complete these job quests, you must start the Wings of the Goddess storyline by going to one of the 3 zones listed below. Each of those 3 zones is found right outside of Juno, and then going to that location on the map where you can find a cavernous maw. Once you find that maw, click on it and it's going to start your Wings of the Goddess storyline. Once the cutscene is complete, you will actually be in the past and can then pick a nation in the past that you want to be affiliated with. It doesn't have to be the same as the one you're affiliated with in the present, and then you will be able to complete the job quest for either Dancer or Scholar. Lastly, make sure you grab those home points while you're here so you have easy access to the past in the future. I will also point out that both of these can be very good sub-jobs. Scholar makes a great replacement for either White Mage, Red Mage, or Black Mage as a sub-job for mages, and Dancer can be a good sub-job for solo players that wish to self-heal. This brings us to our last 2 jobs, Rune Fencer and Geomancer. Both jobs can be acquired through the Seekers of Aldulin expansion pack. Now, in order to acquire these jobs, you're going to have to start the Seekers of Aldulin mission by heading to Lower Juno and speaking with Darcia at the Chamber of Commerce at H7. She will set you on your path to being able to get access to Aldulin and therefore being able to unlock these 2 jobs. Similar to the Treasures expansion, you're going to have to do some upfront work before you can get access to these 2 quests. Usually about an hour worth of cutscenes and running around before you're actually in Aldulin and ready to start these 2 quests, so make sure you keep that in mind. Lastly, when you finally do get to town in Aldulin, make sure you get the home points so that you can easily travel back here in the future. Rune Fencer can be used for a magic defense and evasion sub-job for some tanks, but in general, neither of these 2 are used for sub-jobs often. Next, I want to talk about good behaviors you should be in when you're leveling for those first 30 levels of your main job, and really any job that you're leveling. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're skilling up the main skills of that job as you're doing it. Now, I know it can be very easy, especially with all the trust these days, to just quickly tag a mob and then move on to the next one while your trust quickly kill it, making it so you can get as much experience as possible. And this is a very efficient way of getting experience. However, using this method makes it so that you get very few skill ups for your job, and if you continue to use it for too long, when you get to higher level mobs, you will not be able to hit them with any accuracy whatsoever because your skill level is going to be so much lower than the mobs you are fighting. Therefore, you need to make sure that you are continually skilling up both your main weapon and, if you are a mage job, all of your primary mage skills. To get a skill up, all you need to do is use a particular spell or ability that is affiliated with that skill, and it has a chance to get a skill up. Now, the next 3 things I want to talk about are weapons, armor, and spells, and these kind of all go together depending on what kind of job you have. Now, during those first 30 levels, the levels come up extremely quickly, usually several levels an hour, if not more. Therefore, it doesn't really make a sense to keep going back to town and upgrading your weapons, armor, and spells for those short periods of time. However, every 10 levels or so as you're going through these first 30 levels, I would advise going back to town and re-upping these things. And especially when you get to level 30, make sure you stop and equip yourself with decent gear for your primary weapon, your armor, and then make sure that if you are in a mage job or any kind of job that has spells, that you get all of your spells for that job up until that level 30. Now, how it is you can get those spells is entirely up to you. Sometimes you can get them off the auction house, sometimes they are offered from NPCs around the world, and some of them are offered through special quests. So you also have to determine what is the best way for you to acquire these things in the world of Final Fantasy XI. Now, when it comes to getting weapons and gear, the path is actually fairly more clear. I suggest simply going to the Unity NPC as I've recommended in the past and continually updating your gear through him, or you can also go to the Gate Guard in your home nation and they will offer a small selection of gear as well. Note that you can of course also get gear off the auction house, or camp notorious monsters for gear, but really, most of that gear is going to be outdated very quickly, and therefore you're not really going to get the benefit back from the time that you were going to invest in those things. In the upper right hand corner there, you see me doing the quest to get Utsesame Ichi. Now, two alternative ways I could have gotten this is by simply going to the auction house and purchasing the scroll, or if I have a Tenshodo license, I can actually go inside of the Tenshodo and also purchase it from one of the NPCs inside of there. Now, if you were going to go with the questing method to get your scrolls, you'll notice that some of the NPCs do not offer you the quest right away. That is normally because it is locked behind a particular fame level, and that quest will not be offered to you from that NPC until you are more well known to them. Therefore, you will have to do more quests and acts with the other quest in that nation in order to increase your fame level and be offered that quest. Wanted to go ahead and offer an example of the way this works, so that if you encounter a particular quest that you can't get yet, you know how it is you can deal with this situation. Now on the right hand side there, currently, we are undergoing the quest of Shady Business to increase our Norg and Tenshodo fame so that we can get all of our ninja quest. Now likewise, if we need to increase our Sandoria, Bastuk, Selbina, Rabau, or Juno fame, we would do the quest Only the Best. For Windurst and Kazam, we do Mandragora Mad. And for the Aldulin, there's a series of quests you want to do repeatedly, every conquest tally, and that is A Shot in the Dark, Cafeteria, It Sets My Heart Aflutter, and A Good Pair of Croc. You can look up the objectives that are needed to complete these quests on BG Wiki. Next, let's move on to Magical Maps. Now, I'd already suggested earlier in the series that you purchase all maps that are valued at 200 and 600 gil. Now I suggest you go back to that same map NPC and purchase pretty much all of the remainder of the maps that should all be worth 3,000 gil. There are only 3 exceptions that are at the very end that are worth 30,000 gil each that you can skip for now. Now the total cost of all of these 3,000 gil scrolls will be upwards of 150,000 gil. However, it's incredibly important that you have these as you're soon about to travel around the world of Vana'diel for a variety of reasons, including quest, missions, and exploration, and these maps will be critical in regards to knowing how it is to get around. The total cost for these 3,000 gil scrolls should be about 150k. If you don't have that available right now, I suggest using your sparks to get Archeron shields. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, it should only take about a handful of shields in order to get enough gil to complete getting all of these maps. Next, let's move on to macros, as I feel level 30 is a good time that you should start employing the use of them. Now a macro is going to automatically do a series of actions anytime you hit control plus any number 1 through 0, or alternate and any number 1 through 0. Now if you go underneath your options menu and then go to macros, you'll see 2 options. One for macro sets, the other one for gear sets. Now gear sets will allow you to set 100 sets of gear for all the jobs that you will use. We will discuss this in a future episode. For now, click on the macro sets. Now here, we have 10 different banks of macros for each book that we have. Name that first book, whatever job it is you're going to use as your main to begin with, and then go ahead and start editing that book. Now what macros you use are completely up to you and more than likely the job that you're using. But here are a few suggestions. The first one you want to have is some kind of pulling macro. I usually put this in Alt 1. Now if you're on a tank job, this will normally be provoke. So you'd have /JA and then in quotes provoke space and in the parentheses T. On line 1 of Alt 1, and it will automatically execute provoke every time you push that Alt 1 key combination. The next most useful one I'm going to use is one to put my shadows up. So I'm going to use /MA, then in quotes Utsesame, and then space, and this time inside of the brackets I'm going to put me instead of T, and this will make it so that I cast Utsesame Ichi on myself every time I use Control 0 like I'm doing right now. To find out which macros you should be setting up, I would suggest going to your job's abilities menu and magic menu and seeing which of those spells and abilities you use most frequently and then setting up macros for those. The other most common macro you should use is a weapon skill macro so that you can easily use your most commonly used weapon skill. To do this, simply put /WS, then the weapon skill in quotations, and then T inside of the parentheses at the end. You can also use a ranged weapon with using the macro of /RA and then just T in the brackets. You can also use an item by using /item space the item name inside the parentheses and then specifying either the target or me in the bracket. That'll be it for what I would call the introduction to the macro system. Later on in the game, we'll use more complex macros in combination with gear swaps. This brings us to the last thing I'll be mentioning in this episode 8 video, and that is once you reach level 30, the first time you enter Port Juno on that 30+ job, you will be greeted with this cutscene that you're seeing right here. This is the first cutscene to Abysia. Now we're not ready to go there yet, but it's important that we start collecting the stones that allow us entry into this impressive zone. As later on, when we finally do get access, how long we can spend in there will be strictly limited by the amount of these stones that we have. In order for the stones to start accruing each day, all you have to do is talk to Joachim in Port Juno, and the accrual will begin. Now at this point in the journey of CyberLogic, I've gotten Warrior, Ninja, and Red Mage to level 30, and Black Mage and Thief to level 15 for my Subjobs. Starting with the next episode, we are going to continue our trek through missions by continuing through our Rhapsodies of Vana'diel missions, and more importantly, our Sandoria mission progression, which is the current thing holding us back from progressing further along the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel storyline. We'll see you next time on our trek to level 40. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.